Thanks for joining me. Showing God exists in 5 minutes is a small portion of a more extensive piece that I've put together, so be on the lookout for that one too. Frank B. Salisbury, who received his PhD from California Institute of Technology, calculates that the probability of a typical DNA chain happening by chance to be 1 in 10 to the 600th power. To get an idea of probability and odds, did you know that the odds of 1 in 10 to the 17th power are equivalent to covering the whole state of Texas with silver dollar coins 2 feet deep, coloring one red and turning it over, then having someone blindfolded and picking that one up first? That is 10 to the 17th power. The state of Texas is 862 miles or 1,387 kilometers from the furthest points and would take over 12 hours to drive. Would you take your chances on that odd? That is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Now think of what the odds of one DNA cell are again. 1 in 10 to the 600th power. One DNA cell contains the information of 8,000 books. Do you think it could have had an author? Bill Gates had this to say about DNA, and I quote, "DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software we've ever created," end quote. Since DNA is the instruction book of life and is more advanced than any software ever created, how did the book write itself with such complexity? Do you think it would take more faith to believe the DNA cell came by chance over believing a supernatural God created it? Sir Isaac Newton, who discovered the law of gravity, said, and I quote, "In the absence of any other proof, the thumb alone would convince me of God's existence," end quote. How about the complexity of the eye? The eye is far more advanced than the top camera that took researchers numerous years and millions of dollars to make. The eye blinks 400 million times in an average lifetime. It would take years for a supercomputer to simulate what our eyes can do in 1 minute. The eye has 7 million cones and 100 million rods. We have tears to wash our eyes, self-cleaning, eyelids to protect our eyes from too much light and from foreign objects, and it focuses as a camera with a zoom lens. The eye was designed. How about the brain? There are 100 billion neurons, and each one is connected to thousands of other neurons by a synapse. There are about 5,000 million possible ways for linking all your neurons together. The brain could perform 1,000 million computations a second. Boston University biochemist Isaac Asimov said, and I quote, "The human brain then is the most complicated organization of matter that we know," end quote. In just one human brain, there's probably more wiring and more electrical circuitry than in all the computer systems of the world put together. Number 2, life was planned for our existence. Dr. Mark Horton said, and I quote, "If the balance between gravity and the expansion rate were altered by 1 part in 1 million billion, there would be no galaxy, stars, planets, or life," end quote. I said billion 7 times. Oxford physicist Roger Penrose, a peer of the renowned late atheist Stephen Hawking, calculated that the chance of a universe capable of supporting life as we know it is 1 part in 10 raised to the power of 10 raised to the power of 123. This number is so large that if you were to write out each zero as the size of a proton, it could not fit within the known universe. He writes, and I quote, "Such figures are beyond human comprehension. We cannot help but wonder how these constants could have happened to have these values. Just a slight change in even a few of these numbers, and atoms could not form, stars could not shine, the earth and all its inhabitants could not even exist," end quote. My question then is, how did this happen on its own? Number 3, logic. If you saw a painting, you would recognize there had to have been a painter. Even though you couldn't see them or talk to them, the painting was proof there was a painter. The same could be said of creation. Creation demands the existence of a creator. If I wrote the name David out in the sand at a remote beach, the next person who walked by would recognize someone had been there to write David. And yet think of how simple that logic is. God's signature is in creation. You see his design everywhere. That is logical. Thanks for joining me, and don't forget to subscribe below.